Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Maja Dolina and I come from the Slovenian Social Science Data Archives, and I'm here basically today to present to you with my colleague Katja the work we are doing within the CESSDA Data Catalogue Upgrade Task Project. So besides me within the project, there is also Markus from Finnish Social Science Data Archive and Benjamin from the Norwegian Center for Research Data, of course, besides Katja as well. So yeah. So the Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives developed a portal for discovering data, and this is called the CESSDA Data Catalogue, which contains metadata of studies from CESSDA service providers and basically serves as an entry point for search and discovery of European social science data. The CDC has been present in the European research space for several years now, but its development has been kind of hampered by metadata harmonization and technical support issues as well. So the aim of this presentation is to present to you the findings of the CDC Upgrade Task Group project under the CESSDA Agenda 2124. Our main task here is to plan major new features or updates of the next version of the data catalog, and this includes implementing variable level information in the data catalog and basically focusing also on some additional prioritized items from the CDC wish list. So based on a desk research of available resources, a survey of SPs about needed improvements of the CDC, analysis of their variable level metadata examples, evaluations of some applications on which the CDC could potentially be built on in the future, and some examination of similar catalogs, we will develop a list of recommendations for the next CDC release. From the beginning of our project, it was clear to us that in order to successfully complete this task, we will need to establish various contacts with different groups and tasks or other projects that are also related in some way or another to the CDC. This is, for example, the CDC user group within CESSDA, then also this Dataverse group within CESSDA, Metadata Office, CDC User Experience Research Project, for example, also the EQB project to some extent, and so on. And all these contacts were successfully established, and also several members of this task were actively participated also in the current CDC developments. We also continually follow all of the new developments and news within CESSDA and individual SPs, such as the new CESSDA data access policy, the new rules concerning the validation of harvested metadata, the PID validation, and all the future mapping plans of the CDC to the OpenAIRE, B2Find, Shima.org, and Dublin Core. And of course, we also follow developments within and across SPs in Dataverse application as one of the potential tools that the CDC could be based on. So since not much was known about how individual SPs view the future development of the CDC, we decided to develop a survey to gain some insight into their views on the future. So the survey was distributed through March and April this year, and we received it together like 15 responses. And out of that, 9 SPs provided us with their variable level metadata examples that we could examine. So in terms of additional filters that could be helpful for future versions of the catalog, data access, time methods, and dataset type came up. By dataset type, we mean here distinction between quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods datasets. In terms of richness of metadata in the current version of the catalog, most of the SPs agreed that there is enough metadata already. However, some of them also made some additional suggestions to include universe information, type of data set, and also the date when metadata was published in the CDC. In terms of improvements of functionalities of the catalog, the majority of SPs said that there are no improvements necessary. Some of them, however, had some small ideas from improvements in terms of clarity and findability. So in terms of improvements of the overall user experience, there were more ideas. A couple of SPs reported various language selection issues that will need to be addressed. And there was also a general understanding that the user guide should be made more prominent, and an interesting idea also popped up that included a demonstration video on how to use the catalog. There was also an idea that similar studies list should include all studies in the catalog and not only studies by the individual SPs. And overall, the SPs agreed that a strong multilingual support is very important. So this will have to be considered in designing also future versions to take into consideration all the hindering factors and possibilities here. So concerning additional information that could be included in the CDC, the SPs reported to include variable level information, which is basically precisely what our project is aiming to do. So we were really happy to see this result. And also dataset type, as I already mentioned, and study citation information about related publications were exposed here. Our last question within the survey concerned the willingness of SPs to include information on variables in the CDC. The results here show that the majority of them could share variable label, names, then questions, texts, variable statistics, responses, and variable groups. Now I'll give the word to my colleague Katja, who will present to you some other results from our project.
Thank you, Maya. Could you go to next slide, please? As Maya mentioned before, we asked service providers to provide us variable level metadata files when we conducted the survey. And 9 service providers sent us examples of their variable information. 8 use DDI codebook and only 1 uses DDI lifecycle. Together, we got 11 documents and around 1 million lines of XML, and we went through all of them. And now I present the most common variable level information elements that appeared in those files. And even if I say that, for example, 7 out of 9 service providers have some feature, it does not mean that every record or every variable has that feature. And not surprisingly, all files included basic variable information. All SPs had ID, name, and label of the variable. 8 of 9 had information if variable is continuous or discrete. 7 had literal question texts, and 6 had interviewer instructions. 8 of 9 service providers had summary statistic information for variables. In codebook, there exist 9 types of summary statistics: mean, median, mode, valid, invalid, minimum, maximum, standard deviation, and other. Only 1 SP uses 8 of them, and 1 only 5. All service providers had some information on categories and values. 7 out of 9 had information if category represents missing value, and also information about frequency of the category. 7 SPs out of 9 had information about technical format of the variable, and also 7 had information about variable groups. Next slide, please, Maya. After we analyzed the survey results and XML file examples, we noticed that we need to have more information about the metadata of the service providers, but we didn't want to bother SPs with a new survey any longer. So we decided to do some desk research about available metadata. We collected data in August, and some of data is from September, and we collected it from the data catalogs of the service providers. We did not go through all the metadata records. We just checked few randomly chosen ones. Our data represents the situation in early autumn. We know that many service providers are changing their systems and amending their metadata, so the situation might be slightly different now. Our research questions included, for example, how many SPs are using DDI vocabularies or have at least some information about analysis unit, mode of collection, time method, and sampling procedure. We were interested in the usage of the vocabularies because when the vocabularies are used, the metadata is harmonized and standardized, and it's easier to do, for example, filters for the data catalog. We were also interested, is there information about related publications, universe, and data type, and of course, which information service providers have about variables. Next slide, please. There is a diagram of the usage of the DDI vocabularies in specific fields. You may see that almost half of the service providers use DDI vocabularies when describing the time dimension of the data collection and mode of collection. Around 35% had this information, but they did not use DDI vocabulary. Over 80% of CESSDA service providers have information of unit of observation and sampling in their metadata. Using DDI vocabularies is still quite rare, and around 40% had used analysis unit vocabulary and 30% sampling procedure vocabulary. Next slide, please. And then we checked the presence of some selected metadata fields. And those fields were universe, related publications, and dataset type. We selected these because they were mentioned in the survey as desirable metadata fields for the catalog. And over 75% of service providers had all of the three. For a dataset type, we accepted anything from quali-quanti distinction to more specific, for example, the information that it is numeric or text or something more. Next slide, please. And then the variable level metadata. We were interested in this because we know that amending the variable level metadata is very laborious, especially if it needs to be done manually. And almost 90% of SPs have variable name and label, and around 80% have documented categories and values. And over 70% seems to have at least some information about the summary statistic, but only around 60% has question wording. Please note that we check the information from the catalogs of the service providers. So it is possible that there are cases that the service provider has the metadata we were interested in, but it doesn't publish it. And it is also possible that we just had a bad luck and our randomly selected records were missing this information. Please, Maija, continue. Maija, you're muted.
Yes, I noticed. I'm sorry. So yeah, to continue, we also compared the various applications on which the CDC might be based in the future, and we choose to evaluate for now Dataverse and Collectica as potential applications that are of interest to us. Maybe in the future we will add something more here. So our results show that Dataverse on one hand is good for presenting study metadata. However, it currently does not allow for variable level discovery and search. Lately, we have found out that some current developments from CESSDA SPs show some possible solutions also in this field, and that CDC could potentially use to display variable level information in Dataverse as well. So we will be looking into this and seeing what the progress will be on this area. However, we evaluated Dataverse at the end as great for searching and filtering study metadata because there are a lot of customization already readily available in the default version of the Dataverse. But we also exposed some potential multilinguality issues for metadata because it is currently not possible to have the same persistent identifier of a study and study descriptions in different languages, because each study needs to have its own DOI in order to be part of Dataverse. So it's kind of hard to display that because the tool does not allow yet for that. We concluded our evaluation of the tool as having potential to be used in the future for the CDC, but it would need some additional developments or integrations with other applications in order to allow for a variable level discovery and search. On the other hand, is Collectica that covers almost the entire research lifecycle. It does work well with longitudinal and repeated studies, and it also supports variable documentation, including variable cascade and variable lineage structure. It supports multilinguality of metadata, and we concluded our evaluation of Collectica as having potential to be used in the future for the CDC. However, the downside of this tool is its web representation. So the Collectica portal, which was not designed basically for this purpose that we are trying to use it for. So the use of Collectica for CDC would require changes in the configuration, and a new interface would need to be developed on top of the Collectica repository to host the CDC. So the final result of this analysis of the two tools show us that each of the tool covers some different parts of the desired functionality and representation we are searching for. So a solution would be kind of a mix of both. This would be kind of ideal. So we're going to look at some maybe potential other tools or other solutions for this. We also compared other data catalogs to the existing CDC. So data catalogs in general look quite similar to each other and almost always have the same basic features. But we did find some useful additional features on other catalogs that could be added to the CDC. One example of this is tooltips that include help about using the filter and the search in general. This you can see on the picture on the right-hand side. And then there is also possibility to hide or show some information like the abstract in the result list, which is something that the catalog of ICPCR is using, or some options of expanding some filters by default. So in comparing different catalogs, we discovered that filters have some of the biggest differences amongst themselves. So through catalogs, firstly, this is the variation in the amount of available filters. For example, CDC currently has 4 filters that are freely exposed. Additional ones can be then accessed through other ways, through some drop-down menus where you can filter out results. And the studies within the ICPCR, for example, have 17 filters that are exposed. So
Maya, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So other catalogs usually try to list all the options for filters in some way, which ends up being way too complicated and takes too much space in the web interface compared to the CDC. And it might be kind of overwhelming for the final user to use them. So to conclude, our work is still in progress, and we have shared with you only the preliminary results and ideas that came up through our various modes of analysis. We will make our final recommendations in our final report that is due in March 2022. Our main challenge here is whether to build the CDC, the future fit CDC on the SP's existing metadata, but because SPs primarily use the DDI codebook, or to basically advocate for a metadata upgrade, that is the DDI lifecycle that is currently used only by a handful of SPs. Of course, the result of either of the paths could be limited functionality for end users who want to search and find variables documented in different languages. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, we are happy to take them.